If we look at the third category of questions which appear in case of comprehension, called as perception questions, this is what the structure really looks like. There's a paragraph on top, a question asked in the middle, answer choices in the end. This is the question stimulus, this is the question stem, they are the four options. In case of questions of perception type, the paragraph which is given on top is always in the form of an argument. So tell me, what is your understanding of the word argument? What is an argument? Counter statement has two arguments. So what is an argument? Something that supports a hypothesis. It doesn't have any anger. There is nothing negative about arguments also. So why would you give your viewpoint about something? Why do you want to start a controversy? No. To reach a common ground would be a discussion. Why will I argue with you? Why will you prefer arguing with me? Tell me the reason. Because you want to prove a point. If you want to prove a point, you will have to possibly convince the other person. Everything in an argument depends upon one single word and its understanding. That is convincing. Whenever you want to convince somebody, you have to do an argument. And whenever you do an argument, that argument must have your own viewpoint which you're trying to convince about. And that argument should also have reasons why that particular viewpoint of yours is perfectly correct. That is the reason why every argument needs to have a clear viewpoint, and it needs to have one or more than one reasons which prove that particular viewpoint to be correct. That is something which helps a particular person. So every argument which will be present in case of your exam questions, they will always have one clear viewpoint or a conclusion, as we call it in layman's language, and there would be one or more than one reasons which will support that particular viewpoint. So I'm giving you a very simple argument. Annie will not get this job as she has no work experience. If this is my argument, my question to you is this part supporting this one, or is this part supporting this one? Is the first part supporting the second one? Is the second one supporting the first one? In this argument, will a conclusion require support, or will a reason require support? Conclusion would require support, which means this part has to be the conclusion and this part has to be the reason. This is the reason which is being given to prove this particular conclusion. These conclusions in case of arguments may be presented in the form of opinion, suggestion, recommendation, advice, orders, hypothesis, a prediction, an administrative plan, or a business plan. And there are certain words which help us in case of these paragraphs. Anything which is written after the word keywords, therefore, hence, clearly, so, should, thus, in conclusion, consequently, as a result, advisable, it must be true, it follows that, whatever will be written will always be the conclusion. But all paragraphs will not be so easy. So in case a paragraph does not have these words, then you'll have to figure out the conclusion by checking which part supports which part. The part which supports is always the reason, the part which gets supported is always the conclusion. I want you to write down the list of these words quickly. This will help. Give the heading conclusion keywords. Written. Write down the sentence on top. Below this underlined part, write down conclusion. We are going to refer back to this argument several times. This particular portion of the argument which is supporting the conclusion is called as reasons, and reasons are the information that the author of the argument provides to support his conclusion or to convince about his conclusion. Once you have identified the right conclusion in the argument, whatever is there present in this argument, remaining part, all of that would be reasons. Again, in case of reasons also, there are certain keywords which help you identify a particular confusing reason. Anything which follows, since, as a result of, because, suppose, in the light of, as, will always be a reason. It will not be a conclusion. That is how you can identify them. Conclusion will always be one in number, and reasons can be one or more than one reason in a single argument. Done? Because conclusion and reasons can be identified very quickly and easily, that is the reason why questions will not ask you what is the conclusion or the reason in this particular argument. Instead, they will ask you for something which has to be found out by using brains. That is the reason why some of the reasons may not be written down by the author in the paragraph. And these reasons, which are very clearly understood from the rest of the information, are called as assumptions. So, a third component in case of your arguments would be an assumption. Assumptions will always be those essential reasons which are required for the conclusion to be true. Unless and until they are present, the argument is wrong. They are so clearly understood in the argument that there may be no need for you to write them down or for the author to write them down in the first place. Being an important reason, assumptions will always support the conclusion of the argument. So, reasons plus assumptions taken together, they would end up convincing about the conclusion in the right manner. So, this is where the focus really is in case of these questions. So, if I look at this argument, Annie will not get this job as she has no experience. This argument has got a conclusion, a reason, and it has one or more than one assumptions. I want you to write down 4 assumptions possible in case of this argument. I'll repeat what assumptions are. Assumption is that reason which is not written down, but it is required for the conclusion to be true. Once you have found out the assumption, you will realize that the assumption will always strengthen the conclusion. So, think about 4 assumptions possible which are there in this argument. Write them down, 4 of them. You're doing it for the first time, so you have all the freedom to make mistakes. Get creative. Whatever is your understanding, write down 4 assumptions based upon that. So, write down. What is not written here, but it is understood from this information, and it is required for this conclusion to be true, and that particular information strengthens this conclusion. Write it down, 4 of them. They have to be complete grammatically correct sentences. Don't write hints. I've never heard that question before. I've been teaching since 1994. Assumptions will never contradict each other. They'll always strengthen the conclusion, so they have to be on the same lines. Full sentence, grammatically correct sentence. Without discussion, without looking around. Written 4? Okay, let me visualize what possibly you've written. Have you written this assumption, this job needs work experience? Yes, no. One needs work experience to do this job? Yes. People need work experience to get this job? Other people with work experience will end up getting this job? Yes. See, I'm a mind reader. Annie does not have relevant work experience. Annie cannot convince the interview panel. Annie's qualifications cannot compensate for a lack of work experience. Annie has applied for the job, and he wants this job, and he needs this job, and he's a fresher, and he should apply somewhere else. Apart from these 12 assumptions, have you written something else? What is that? She does not meet eligibility, and Annie has no money. Okay. Annie is currently unemployed. Loudly. Okay. And there are more capable people who are available. Okay. And loudly. There's a vacant job for which Annie has applied. Annie is very lazy. Loudly. Okay. The 12 assumptions written here and whatever you've spoken are all wrong. This is all wrong. This is all wrong, which means that we possibly need to have a better understanding of the word assumption. I'll tell you the problem. The problem is you are overthinking. And when you overthink without rhyme or reason, then you can think about 100 or 1,000 assumptions also. There is a clear formula, a mathematical formula in order to find an assumption. So, let's understand what that formula is. I want you to write it down as a first step, and then we'll understand it. Write it. Written? I'm just repeating this stuff. We'll understand it when we apply this on questions. The first step is you identify the conclusion and the reasons. This is something which we've already done. The method is to find out which part supports which particular part that helps you identify conclusion and reasons. Second step is you need to find a mismatch between conclusion and reason. What is a mismatch? Mismatch are two things. One of them is present in the conclusion but absent in the reasons. The second one is present in reasons but absent in the conclusion. We'll see how this mismatch is found out. Once you've identified the mismatch, then you need to use your brains and logically connect the mismatch so that the conclusion becomes stronger because of that connection which you found. So instead of this argument, I'm going to give you a more mathematical argument. Suppose the argument given to you is x is equal to y as y is equal to z. In case of this particular argument, there are two parts, the red and the black part. Tell me which part is conclusion, which one is the reason. Is the red one the conclusion or is the black one the conclusion? We just studied something, you've forgotten it. I made you write it also. What does as show? Reason. What comes after as? That is reason. So you don't even have to think. This is a South Delhi girl sound, which is there's another sound which my sons emulate and copy, and that is a lot of South Delhi girls say, Bhaiya. We go shopping, and my sons hear anyone with saying that thing, and they burst out laughing. Okay. So this first part is the conclusion, second part is the reason. Once you found this, then you can see that x is present in the conclusion and it is absent in the reasons. Reasons contain z, which is absent in the conclusion. This is the mismatch between the two of them. Is it easy enough? Are you thinking? Are you thinking or not? Yes, no. Are you thinking? अभी नहीं सोचना है. जब सोचने का टाइम आएगा मैं बताऊंगा आपको. अभी तो मैं सिंपल एक बात पूछ रहा हूं. क्या x रीजन में है? हाँ ना. नहीं है तो x से एक मिसमैच हो गया. क्या z कंक्लूजन में है? हाँ या ना? X is present in the conclusion, it is absent in the reasons. So this is one part of the mismatch. Z is present in the reasons, absent in the conclusion. This is the second part of the mismatch. There is nothing difficult or rocket science involved in this. It's very easy. Once you identified a mismatch, now you have to use your brains to understand what should be the relationship between X and Z so that this particular conclusion, X is equal to Y, becomes stronger and right. Equal to. This is the only amount of brains that you need to use. This is assumption. Apply the same thing here also now. In case of this particular argument, the first part was conclusion, second part was reasons. If you look at the conclusion, conclusion talks about getting this job. There is nothing mentioned about getting this job in case of the reasons. On the other hand, if you look at the reason, reason talks about work experience or absence of work experience. That is not mentioned in case of the conclusion. This is the second part of the mismatch. And to keep things on track, to keep things in scope, are we doing an argument about Annie? Are we doing an argument about everyone in the world? About Annie. So Annie should also be part of that assumption that we make. Now I want you to make a sentence using this encircled part, the green parts. Annie, get this job, work experience. Make one sentence, simple sentence, which uses these three concepts. That would be the assumption. And it should make sense. It should strengthen the conclusion also. If she has work experience. To get this job, Annie needs to have work experience, or Annie needs to have work experience to get this job. This is the only single assumption possible. Write it down. Apart from this assumption, all the rest of the assumptions are wrong. An assumption focusing upon Annie is a female is wrong. We don't know about that. Annie doesn't have work experience is written. Annie is a fresher written. All of those things are written here. And a lot of stuff which you gave me was pure philosophy, not required. So use the formula, you'll end up getting one single assumption clear. That will be the right assumption. Mismatch is one thing which is present in the conclusion, not present in the reasons. and another thing which is present in reasons, not present in conclusion. वो तो ठीक है ना इसमें? Now open up page number 3. Page number 3 has 4 arguments written. First 2 arguments are on the similar lines as whatever we've just done. We've done 2 arguments so far. One about Annie, a second one about XYZ. Based upon whatever you've learned there, I want you to spend time, clear 10 minutes upon these 4 arguments. Write down conclusion, reason, whatever assumptions you can figure out. First 2 are exactly similar. The third and the fourth one are slightly different, but I still want you to try your hand at it. बातें नहीं करनी है सर, बातें नहीं करनी है और सोचना नहीं है ज्यादा. फिर से बता रहा हूं. नहीं, nothing to sorry about. See, if you have to do a single work, it is very easy. You just have to put in hard work. The problems arise when you've got to balance things. There are some topics in which you have to actually think, other topics in which you should not think. There are topics in which you have to do philosophy also, and there are some topics in which you have to do jhakmari also. This is a topic in which you've got to limit yourself. You'll have to control yourself. Be within scope of the argument. Don't think more than that. I've kept it funny so that you'll remember it also. We'll do it together. Here, what is the conclusion? Teenagers do not eat the most ice cream as compared to other age groups is the conclusion. Apart from this, whatever is written here is reasons. And when I do a mismatch check, I can very clearly see that your conclusion talks about teenagers and the reasons talk about people in the age group 40 to 60 years. My question to you is, what should be the relationship between teenagers and people in the age group 40 to 60 years? As a result of that relationship, this conclusion that teenagers do not eat the most ice cream as compared to other age groups should become stronger. You're right, perfectly right. For this argument to be right, should teenagers belong to the age group or not belong? They should not belong. So the simple assumption out here is teenagers do not belong to the age group 40 to 60 years. Yeah, does it strengthen the conclusion? Yes, it does. Yes. If teenagers belong to the age group 40 to 60 years, then this argument is wrong. A problem in case of this particular assumption is that a lot of you will think of it as a fact which you already know. So it cannot be an assumption. No, even that thing can be an assumption. Assumption is something which is so easily understood that you have a problem in realizing what the assumption is. And the assumption out here is teenagers do not belong to the age group 40 to 60 years. Apart from this mismatch which we found, is there any other mismatch which is possible here? Buying and eating ice cream. So your reasons talk about buying of ice cream, while your conclusion talks about eating of ice cream. So what should be the relationship between buying and eating of ice cream? As a result of that relationship, the conclusion that teenagers do not eat the most ice cream becomes correct. Not more. Be more clearer, more specific. People who buy ice cream eat it themselves and do not give it to others. Why? Because if all the ice cream is being bought by people in the age of 40 to 60 years and they're buying it for their own kids who are teenagers and they're sharing it with them, then teenagers may be the biggest group eating the greatest amount of ice cream. Second assumption out here is people who buy ice cream eat it themselves and don't share it with others. Write it down. People who buy ice cream eat it themselves and do not share it with others. This makes the argument flawless. Now the argument does not have any flaw inside it after you've found the right assumptions. Number of assumptions would depend upon how many mismatches can you find, how many mismatches are actually present. Now we've done 4 arguments so far. In all of those 4 arguments, we found the assumption based upon a commonsensical connection between the mismatch. So these kind of arguments are called as common sense arguments, and the assumptions which you found are called as common sense assumptions. Yeah, ask me. I agree. Yes, mentioned nahi hai. Yes. So people who buy ice cream eat it themselves. Full stop. है ना? So you can decide not to write the word sharing. Don't worry, because you're actually on the right track. We're going to talk about that part of thinking beyond whatever the argument says. Third argument is different from the 4 arguments that we've done so far. If you look at this particular argument, out here the conclusion is no coffee will lead to no migraine, or the argument is saying coffee leads to migraine or coffee causes migraine. On the other hand, if you look at the reasons, then the reasons say people who drink coffee have migraine, people who don't drink coffee, they don't have migraine. I don't see any mismatches here. But yeah. Yes. So what do I do about that? Yes. It's there to confuse you. Simple. The question's language will have a lot of bullshit inside it. Cut through that bullshit. With practice, you'll understand what is relevant and what is irrelevant in a question. Question will have language to confuse you further. If you're already confused, you'll get confused further if you worry about that particular language. So the basic method is form a formula in your head and use that formula to apply it on questions. Although no mismatch is possible out here, but you can see that this particular argument has a causal structure. One thing is causing a second thing to happen, and X is causing a Y to happen. Something of that sort. A coffee is causing a migraine to happen, absence of coffee is causing an absence of migraine to happen. My question to you is that if your conclusion is X is equal to Y, can Y not happen because of other reasons also? Yes, no. It can happen because of other reasons. May happen, may not happen, I'm not very sure. But if this Y can happen because of other reasons, then this information, does it strengthen this conclusion? Does it weaken it? It weakens it. What is the role of assumptions? To strengthen the conclusion. So suppose I say that this is not present. Does this argument become stronger now? This is the assumption. Nothing else causes Y except X, or only X causes Y. This is the first and assumption which is possible out here. As a result of which, my first assumption out here, which is called as a simple causal assumption, would say only coffee causes migraine. Makes life very easy. Argument says X causes Y. My first assumption is only X causes Y. That's an acceptable assumption. Second one is more difficult, more confusing. So now I want you to concentrate. Suppose in your class a new student joins in. You realize 2 special things about that student. One thing which you realize is that this student only wears cotton clothes. His shoes and his belts are made of cotton. Even the books which he carries in class, it is covered, they are covered with the cotton cloth. That's one thing which you observe about him. Second thing which you observe about him is that he has severe skin allergy all over his body. And his skin remains red, hot, inflamed, itchy always, all the time. In such a situation, most of you will think that because he wears only cotton and he also has a severe skin allergy, then possibly the connection which you will make in your head would be, it is possibly because of his allergy that he wears cotton. Agree? But somebody who thinks in a different manner, people who do something called as alternate way of thinking, that guy may even think that this person is already allergic to cotton, and because he wears so much of cotton, so he has this horrible allergy. So from the same information, from the same reasons, 2 opposite conclusions can be made. My question to you is, suppose you are convinced about the first conclusion, that it is because of his allergy that he wears cotton, then don't you need to make an assumption that this particular relationship is wrong? Yes, no? Yes? This is the second assumption. So the simple way is, if the conclusion says X causes Y, our assumption number 1 would say only X causes Y, and our assumption number 2 would say Y does not cause X. So now tell me the language for the second assumption in case of the coffee and migraine thing. Migraine does not lead people to drink coffee. Don't look at whether it is commonsensically acceptable or not. Instead, just write it down. In questions, the migraine and the coffee will be different. There will be other terms which would be used. Just see what is leading to what thing. Based upon that, you can make your assumptions easily. Second one is called as a reverse causal assumption. In a lot of questions, the reverse causal assumption will not make sense. But you just have to see which answer choice says Y does not cause X. That's the right answer. I'll give an explanation for the second assumption. Suppose people who drink coffee have migraine, people who don't drink coffee, they don't have migraine. And coffee is some horrible bitter thing, which is so horrible that nobody in the world wants to drink it. But people who suffer from migraine, if they drink coffee, their migraine becomes less. Then who will drink coffee? People who have migraine, which means in this situation, migraine is leading people to drink coffee. For you to prove a conclusion which says it is coffee which causes migraine, you will have to take the assumption which says migraine does not make people drink coffee. That's the basic logic. But don't worry about the logic part. Just remember the formula. If the conclusion says X causes Y, first assumption would be only X causes Y, second assumption would be Y does not cause X. X and the Y will be different in case of the questions which you encounter. So now we have seen two kind of arguments, common sense and causal arguments. And we've seen three kind of assumptions, the common sense assumption, the simple causal assumption and the reverse causal assumption. The reverse causal assumption is so difficult to handle that in case it is present in any particular question, you should, the moment you identify it, just click that as an answer. That will be the most preferred answer. Then let's come to the next argument. As the language of this argument shows, it is a pretty easy, dumb kind of an argument. In this argument, conclusion has to be this particular part, which is the advice being given. The second sentence is strengthening this particular statement, supporting it. The second part is the reason, first part is the conclusion. This is called as a dumb argument. It is so dumb that it has a very dumb assumption which does not even require mathematics as such, which does not even require a formula. So you tell me what is required for this conclusion to be true. What is the assumption that you found out? Mr. Sharma is a good manager, Mr. Sharma is a better manager at accounts, Mr. Sharma knows accounts. I would say the most basic of assumptions is Mr. Sharma knows accounts. If he does not know accounts, then this argument is a wrong one. You can have different versions of the same assumption. You can have an assumption which says Mr. Sharma knows accounting, assumption which says Mr. Sharma knows management of accounts, Mr. Sharma knows accounting better than others, Mr. Sharma knows how to manage account better than others. All of them mean the same thing. All of them are focused upon can one person do it or not, whatever it is. When we are doing questions on assumptions, now we are moving towards how to choose an answer. Always remember, in case of an assumption question, the right answer will always strengthen the conclusion and it will preferably be in scope. Wrong answers of an assumption question will either be out of scope or else they will weaken the conclusion or they will have no effect upon the conclusion. Take a quick photograph, move on ahead. Why are you thinking so much? Your thinking so much is leading you towards wrong answers. जिसकी बात हो रही है उसी पे फोकस रहो. Okay, let's come to what we are studying. Spend 1 minute on this question. This is the easiest question which I could design in my whole life. I've kept on improving it so that you can understand it better. You can get the answer very quickly. Don't tell me the answer. I expect you to know the answer. But there's something else we'll learn from this one. This is on page number 5 also of exercise. The right answer in case of assumption question has to strengthen the argument. It has to be something which is in scope preferably, which means any answer choice which is weakening the conclusion, any answer choice which is not having any effect upon the conclusion, doesn't strengthen or weaken, is a wrong answer. Any answer choice which is out of scope is most probably a wrong answer. So if I look at this argument, it says Arvind and Sumita are best friends because they spend all their free time with each other. The conclusion definitely is this particular part. Rest of it is reasons. Assumption which you find out here is best friends spend their free time with each other. That is the assumption. Suppose you find the assumption fine and good, then you can get the answer easily. Suppose you cannot figure out the right assumption in a high pressure situation like an exam, then the method of solving this question is different. Then the method is that you look at the argument, identify the conclusion, which is something which everyone can do. Once you identified the conclusion, straight away jump to the answer choices. First choice says Pinto is Sumit's friend. My question to you is there anything mentioned about Pinto here? So if Pinto is not mentioned here, Pinto is something which is completely out of scope. As a result, this has to be a wrong answer. If I look at B choice, it says best friends never spend any time with each other. Best friends is mentioned there, spending free time is mentioned there. As a result, this is in scope. So this is in scope, which is a good thing. But is it strengthening or is it weakening the conclusion? Weakening. Because it is weakening the conclusion, that is the reason why it is wrong. C choice does not make any of the two mistakes. It is clearly in scope and it is also strengthening the conclusion. So both things are good about it. So we leave this one. We will not kick out C choice. A and B are out. D choice says having a friend is cathartic. Anything mentioned here about catharsis? Nothing mentioned. So catharsis has to be something which is out of scope. As a result, it should be the wrong answer. But let's understand one more trick which UPSC plays with you. That trick is when you're giving an exam and you're under high pressure and you're seeing one horrible question after another and your spirits are very low and you're doing a question in which you can understand other answer choices and there is one answer choice which you can't understand, then the first thought which will come to your mind is, I couldn't understand this, this should be the right answer. No. But yes, I'm expecting you all to know the meaning of the word catharsis. So you'll have to Google this word if you don't know this word. E says Arvind and Sumita in the same college, nothing mentioned about same college upstairs. So this is also something which is out of scope. As a result, I can kick out this as an answer. This becomes my right answer, C choice. So right answer choices have to be always strengthening type and they will preferably be in scope. Now move on to page number 6 and start with question numbers. Have we discussed these questions, the first 5? Okay, so let's discuss them first.